In the quiet elegance of Bungalow Grange, a single scream shatters the calm. Gerald Harcourt lies dead, a bloodied paperweight by his side, a cryptic note in his pocket. The truth will out. Who struck him down in the locked library? Was it the nervous niece, hiding a secret? The charming producer with a missing cufflink? Or the silent companion, whose calm conceals a deadly truth? As shadows of scandal and betrayal unravel, only Hercule Poirot's little gray cells can pierce the web of lies. Will you uncover the killer before the final twist? Music crescendos, then fades. Dive into Agatha Christie's novel secrets and surprising twists, a mystery where every clue counts and no one is what they seem. Chapter 1. The gathering at Bungalow Grange. In the golden haze of an early autumn afternoon, the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead seemed to hold its breath, as though anticipating a tremor beneath its placid surface. Bungalow Grange, a sprawling Georgian estate on the village's edge, stood as the centerpiece of this quiet anticipation. Its ivy-clad walls and neatly trimmed hedges whispered of old money and older secrets. And today it buzzed with an unusual gathering of guests, each drawn by the enigmatic invitation of its mistress, Lady Evelyn Harcourt. The drawing room of Bungalow Grange was a study in restrained opulence. Polished mahogany furniture gleamed under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, and a fire crackled in the grate, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the assembled company. Lady Evelyn, a statuesque widow of 60 with sharp blue eyes and a commanding air, presided over the room like a queen holding court. Her guests, an eclectic mix of family, friends, and acquaintances, sipped tea or sherry, their polite murmurs masking a current of unease. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal friend of Hercule Poirot, stood near the tall windows overlooking the manicured lawn. His broad shoulders and military bearing made him a striking figure, though his expression betrayed a faint discomfort. He had been invited at the insistence of Lady Evelyn, who had declared that a man of your integrity, Captain, simply must attend. Hastings, flattered but puzzled, had accepted. Sensing something amiss in the invitation's urgency, he glanced around the room, cataloging the guests with a soldier's eye for detail. There was young Clara Harcourt, Lady Evelyn's niece, a delicate creature of 22 with wide, nervous eyes and a habit of twisting her pearl necklace when addressed. Beside her sat Dr. Maurice Sheldon, the village physician, a weary man in his 40s whose quick, darting glances suggested a mind always at work. Across the room, Mrs. Lavinia Gray, a local gossip with a penchant for lurid novels, fanned herself ostentatiously, her plump cheeks flushed with excitement. Then there was Mr. Rupert Vance, a theatrical producer from London, whose slick smile and tailored suit seemed out of place in the rustic setting. Finally, Miss Beatrice Lyle, Lady Evelyn's companion, hovered near her employer, her plain face and dowdy dress rendering her almost invisible, save for the sharp intelligence in her gaze. The air grew heavy with expectation as Lady Evelyn rose, her silk gown rustling. "My dear friends," she began, her voice clear and resonant, "I have gathered you here for a purpose beyond mere sociability. Tonight, I intend to make an announcement, one that will alter the course of many lives in this room." A ripple of tension passed through the guests. Clara's fingers tightened on her necklace. Dr. Sheldon's eyes narrowed. Mrs. Gray's fan stilled, and Mr. Vance leaned forward, his smile tightening. Only Miss Lyle remained impassive, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Before Lady Evelyn could continue, the double doors to the drawing room burst open, and a maid, her face pale as chalk, stumbled in. "Madam," she gasped, It's Mr. Gerald. He's He's dead. A collective gasp rose from the room. Hastings felt a jolt of adrenaline, his soldier's instincts kicking in. Gerald Harcourt, Lady Evelyn's younger brother, had been a reclusive figure, rarely seen at social gatherings. He had been expected to join them for tea but had not appeared. Now, it seemed, the reason was far graver than tardiness. Lady Evelyn's composure faltered, her hand clutching the back of a chair. "Dead," she whispered. "Where? How?" "In the library, madam," the maid stammered. "I found him just now, lying on the floor. There's blood." Chaos erupted. Mrs. Gray let out a theatrical wail. Clara buried her face in her hands, and Dr. Sheldon sprang to his feet, barking orders for the maid to lead him to the scene. Hastings, his mind racing, followed, his thoughts already turning to his old friend, Hercule Poirot. This was no ordinary misfortune. The air of Bungalow Grange reeked of something darker, something that demanded the little gray cells of the great detective. As they hurried down the oak-paneled corridor, Hastings noted the time on the grandfather clock. 4:47 p.m. The precise ticking seemed to mock the sudden disorder of the house. In the library, they found Gerald Harcourt sprawled across a Persian rug, a crimson stain spreading from a wound at his temple. A heavy brass paperweight lay nearby, its edge smeared with blood. The window was closed, the room undisturbed save for a single overturned chair. Dr. Sheldon knelt beside the body, his fingers probing for a pulse. "He's gone," he said grimly. "Dead for perhaps half an hour, no more." Hastings scanned the room, his eyes catching on small details. A half-empty glass of brandy on the desk, a crumpled letter protruding from Gerald's pocket, and a faint smudge of mud on the rug near the body. His heart sank. This was no accident. This was murder. As the others crowded into the room, their faces a mixture of shock and suspicion, Hastings stepped back, his mind made up. He would telephone Poirot at once. Only the meticulous Belgian could unravel the web of secrets that had already begun to tighten around Bungalow Grange. Chapter 2. The shadow of suspicion. The library at Bungalow Grange was now a tableau of grim silence, broken only by the faint crackle of the fire in the grate and the stifled sobs of Clara Harcourt. The body of Gerald Harcourt lay where it had fallen, the crimson stain on the rug a stark reminder of the violence that had shattered the afternoon's civility. Captain Hastings stood near the door, his eyes sweeping the room, committing every detail to memory. The police had been summoned, but St. Mary Mead's small constabulary was ill-equipped for a crime of this magnitude. Hastings knew that only one man could bring order to this chaos: Hercule Poirot. Lady Evelyn, her face pale but composed, stood by the fireplace, her hands clasped tightly. "This is monstrous," she said, her voice low but steady. Gerald was not a man without enemies, but to be struck down in his own home, it is unthinkable. Dr. Maurice Sheldon, who had remained by the body, rose and dusted his hands. "The blow to the temple was fatal," he said, his tone clinical. "The paperweight was the weapon, no doubt, but whether it was premeditated or a moment of passion, I cannot say." Mrs. Lavinia Gray, her earlier histrionics subdued, clutched her fan like a talisman. "Who could have done such a thing?" she whispered, her eyes darting from face to face. "We were all in the drawing room, were we not?" "Not all," said Rupert Vance, the theatrical producer, his voice smooth but edged with something sharp. "Gerald was absent, and Miss Lyle left to fetch him just before the maid's discovery." Miss Beatrice Lyle, who had been standing quietly near Lady Evelyn, stiffened. "I went to his study." As Lady Evelyn asked, she said, her voice calm but firm. He was not there. I returned to the drawing room immediately. Hastings noted the exchange, his mind cataloging the alibis. The clock in the library showed 4:55 p.m., and the maid had burst in at 4:47. The window of opportunity for the crime was narrow, perhaps between 4:15, when Gerald was last seen alive by a footman, and 4:45, when the maid found him. But who had been where, and when? As the group awaited the police, Hastings slipped out to the hall and placed a call to London. Poirot's voice, precise and cheerful, crackled through the line. "Mon ami Hastings, what calamity brings you to disturb my afternoon tea? A murder, Poirot," Hastings said grimly. "At Bungalow Grange, St. Mary Mead. Gerald Harcourt, struck down in his library. I need you here." There was a pause. Then Poirot's voice grew serious. "A murder, you say? 'Tis interessant. I shall take the next train. Preserve the scene, Hastings, and observe everything." By the time Hastings returned, the local constable, Inspector Japp's acquaintance Sergeant Brooks, had arrived, his notebook open and his expression harried. "Right, then," he said, addressing the group. "No one leaves this house until we've got statements. Captain Hastings, you were here when it happened." "I was in the drawing room with the others," Hastings replied. "We heard the maid's cry and came at once." Sergeant Brooks nodded, scribbling. "And you, Lady Evelyn, where were you?" "At, say, 4:30, in the drawing room, preparing for my announcement," she said. "Everyone was there, except Gerald and Miss Lyle." Briefly, as she said, the sergeant turned to Clara. "Miss Harcourt, you're the victim's niece. When did you last see him?" Clara's hands trembled as she spoke. "This morning, at breakfast. He was preoccupied. He said he had business to attend to in his study." "And what was this announcement Lady Evelyn was to make?" Brooks pressed. Lady Evelyn hesitated, her eyes flickering to her guests. "It concerned my will," she said at last. "I intended to revise it, and I wished to inform those who might be affected." A murmur rippled through the room. Hastings caught the sudden tension in Rupert Vance's posture, the way Dr. Sheldon's fingers twitched, and the faint flush on Mrs. Gray's cheeks. Miss Lyle's expression remained unreadable, but her eyes met Hastings for a fleeting moment, sharp and assessing. Sergeant Brooks moved to the body, examining the paperweight. "No fingerprints, likely wiped clean," he muttered. "And this letter in his pocket, what's this?" He extracted the crumpled paper, unfolding it carefully. It was a single sheet, typed, with no signature. Brooks read aloud. "You cannot hide forever. The truth will out." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Mrs. Gray gasped, and Clara's eyes widened. "What does it mean?" she whispered. "It means," said a new voice from the doorway, "that someone in this house has a secret they wish to keep buried." All heads turned. There, immaculate, in his pinstripe suit, his mustache waxed to perfection, stood Hercule Poirot. His green eyes gleamed with quiet intensity as he surveyed the room. "Bonsoir, Ms. Amos," he said, bowing slightly. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I am here to uncover the truth." Hastings felt a surge of relief. Poirot's presence was like a lighthouse in a fog, steady and unyielding. The detective stepped forward, his gaze lingering on the body, the paperweight, the glass of brandy, and the smudge of mud on the rug. "Hastings," he said softly, "you have done well to call me. This is a puzzle most intricate, but fear not the little gray cells. They are already at work." As Poirot began his examination, Hastings watched the faces of the suspects. Each held a mask of grief or shock, but beneath, he sensed currents of fear, guilt, and calculation. The game had begun, and only Poirot could navigate its twists to the truth. Chapter 3. The rival of Poirot's library at Bungalow Grange had grown colder. The fire's warmth no match for the chill of death that now permeated the room. Hercule Poirot stood motionless for a moment, his small, neat figure a stark contrast to the disarray around him. His eyes, sharp and green as cut emeralds, took in every detail: the sprawled form of Gerald Harcourt, the bloodied paperweight, the overturned chair, and the faint smudge of mud on the Persian rug. To Captain Hastings, watching from the doorway, it was as though Poirot were a painter studying a canvas, seeing patterns invisible to others. "Mon cher Hastings," Poirot said at last, turning to his friend, "you have set before me a most intriguing tableau. A man is dead, and yet the room, it speaks. We must listen carefully to what it says." Sergeant Brooks, still clutching the cryptic letter, looked up with a mix of irritation and relief. "Mr. Poirot, glad you're here. This is a nasty business, and I'll take any help I can get. The letter, the truth will out, suggests someone had a grudge against Harcourt." "Precisement," Poirot replied, his voice smooth as polished wood. "But a grudge is merely the shadow of a motive. We must find the substance. Tell me, Sergeant, who was in this house between 4:30 for this afternoon?" Brooks consulted his notebook. Lady Evelyn and her guests were in the drawing-room, save for Miss Lyle, who went to fetch Mr. Harcourt at about 4:25. The maid, Ellen, found the body at 4:47. The footman, Thomas, saw Mr. Harcourt alive in his study at 4:15. That leaves a window of roughly 30 minutes. Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching slightly. "And the household staff, where were they?" "Cook was in the kitchen, preparing dinner," Brooks said. "The gardener was outside, tending the roses. The housemaid was upstairs, cleaning. Ellen was in the pantry until she went to the library." "Bon," Poirot said, stepping toward the body. He knelt with surprising grace for a man of his fastidious nature, examining Gerald's wound without touching it. The blow was precise, delivered with force. The paperweight, it is heavy, a weapon of opportunity, perhaps, but chosen with care. Hastings, standing near the desk, pointed to the half-empty glass of brandy. "What about this, Poirot? Could it be poisoned?" Poirot sniffed the glass delicately, his nose wrinkling. "Brandy, and nothing more. But the quantity, it is curious. Half a glass. Yet no smell of alcohol on Monsieur Harcourt's breath. This, we shall consider." He rose and turned his attention to the crumpled letter, which Brooks handed to him. Poirot read it silently, his lips pursing. Typed, unsigned, and vague. A threat, perhaps, but also a distraction. We must ask, who benefits from such a note being found? Lady Evelyn, who had been watching from the fireplace, spoke up, her voice steady but strained. "Mr. Poirot, my brother was a private man, but he had no enemies that I know of. This violence is senseless." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "Madam, in my experience, no murder is senseless. There is always a reason, hidden in the heart or the mind. You mentioned an announcement about your will. May I know its nature?" The room stilled. Clara Harcourt's hands trembled, and she looked away. Rupert Vance's smile tightened, and Dr. Sheldon's fingers drummed on his knee. Miss Beatrice Lyle remained impassive, but her eyes flickered toward Lady Evelyn. It was to be a revision, Lady Evelyn said carefully. Gerald had been pressing me to alter the distribution of my estate. He believed certain provisions were unfair. I invited everyone here to discuss it openly. And who stands to gain or lose from this revision? Poirot asked, his gaze sweeping the room. Lady Evelyn hesitated. My niece, Clara, is my primary beneficiary. But there were others, charities, distant relations, and certain obligations. Mrs. Lavinia Gray, unable to contain herself, blurted, Obligations? You mean debts, don't you? Everyone knows Gerald was in financial trouble. Mrs. Gray, Lady Evelyn snapped, her composure cracking. That is hardly relevant. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Au contraire, everything is relevant. Monsieur Harcourt's financial troubles, they are a thread in the tapestry. We shall pull it gently and see what unravels. He turned to the smudge of mud on the rug, bending to inspect it. This mud, it is fresh, yet the day is dry, and the lawn outside is pristine. Where does this come from? And this chair, overturned, why? A struggle, perhaps, but the room is otherwise orderly. Hastings, catching Poirot's train of thought, ventured, could someone have entered from outside? The window is closed. But Poirot shook his head. Hastings. The window is locked from within, and the latch is stiff. No one entered or left this way. The answer lies within this house. Among those present, Sergeant Brooks cleared his throat. I'll need statements from everyone. Mr. Poirot, will you assist? With pleasure, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. But first, I must observe. The little grey cells, they require data. Hastings, you will assist me in speaking to each person privately. We begin with Mademoiselle Clara, I think. As the group dispersed, ushered out by Brooks, Poirot lingered, his gaze returning to the body. Pavham, he murmured. You knew something, did you not? And someone ensured you would never speak it. Hastings felt a chill, not from the cooling room but from the certainty in Poirot's voice. The detective's mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that, to Hastings, seemed impossibly complex. But he knew better than to doubt Poirot. The truth, however elusive, would not escape the little Belgian's grasp. Chapter 4. The questions begin. Morning room at Bungalow Grange, bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon light, was a haven of deceptive calm. Its pale green walls and delicate chintz curtains suggested serenity, but the air crackled with unspoken suspicions as Hercule Poirot began his interviews. Seated at a polished walnut table, his notebook open and his pen poised, Poirot exuded an air of meticulous authority, his green eyes sharp as they studied each gesture and word. Captain Hastings stood by the window, the golden haze of autumn filtering through, his soldiers' instincts attuned to the nervous energy of the house. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 6:15 p.m. Its steady ticks a reminder of the fleeting time to unravel the murder of Gerald Harcourt. Poirot's first subject was Clara Harcourt, who entered with hesitant steps, her delicate frame dwarfed by the room's grandeur. Her wide eyes, framed by dark lashes, darted nervously, and her fingers twisted the pearl necklace at her throat, the beads clicking softly. She sat, smoothing her skirt, and fixed her gaze on the floor, avoiding Poirot's piercing stare. Mademoiselle Clara, Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet but edged with precision. You are the niece of Lady Evelyn, and, I understand, her principal heir. Tell me, if you please, of your uncle, Monsieur Gerald. What was his demeanor this morning at breakfast? Clara's lips parted, then closed, as if weighing her words. He was not himself, she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. He was distracted, checking his silver pocket watch constantly, as if waiting for something or someone. I asked if he was well, but he only muttered about business and left for his study. Poirot's pen scratched a note, his eyes never leaving her face. This watch, it was important to him, an heirloom, you said. Did he always carry it? Yes, always, Clara replied, her fingers tightening on the pearls. He was particular about it, winding it every evening. It was engraved with the family crest, a lion rampant. Most interesting, Poirot murmured, his mustache twitching. And this announcement of Lady Evelyn's concerning her will, did you know its details? Clara's cheeks flushed, and she looked away, her voice trembling. Not precisely. Aunt Evelyn said she was reconsidering her beneficiaries. Uncle Gerald was upset. He told me yesterday it was unjust to some, but he wouldn't say more. I thought he meant me. But now, her voice trailed off, and a tear glistened in her eye. Poirot leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle but probing. And your movements, mademoiselle, between 4 o'clock and 4:45 this afternoon? Be precise, s'il vous plaît. I was in the drawing room with the others, Clara said quickly, her words tumbling out. I stepped out to the hall at 4:20 to fetch my shawl. It was chilly. I was gone only a moment, back by 4:22. I swear, I didn't go near the library. Hastings, watching closely, noted the urgency in her voice, the way her eyes flicked to the door. Was it fear of suspicion or something deeper? Poirot's nod was almost imperceptible, as if he, too, sensed a hidden layer. Merci, mademoiselle, he said, dismissing her with a courteous smile. You have been most helpful. Next came Dr. Maurice Sheldon, who strode in with a brisk air, his weary frame taut with suppressed energy. His sharp eyes met Poirot's without flinching, but his fingers drummed a restless rhythm on his knee. As he sat, I suppose you want my medical opinion on the murder, he said, his voice clipped. Single blow to the temple, fatal. Paperweight was the weapon, no question. Poirot's eyebrow arched. Your expertise is appreciated, doctor, but I am more interested in you. Where were you at the time of the crime? In the drawing room, Sheldon said firmly, his gaze steady. I was discussing a recent article on neurology with Mrs. Gray until the maid's scream at 4:47. I went straight to the library to examine the body. And Monsieur Gerald, did you know him well? Poirot's tone was deceptively casual. Sheldon's jaw tightened. As his physician, he had high blood pressure, nerves frayed. He'd been under strain, money troubles, mostly. Asked me for a loan last month, which I refused. I don't lend to patients. Poirot's pen paused. Financial strain, you say? And this letter found in his pocket. The truth will out. Any thoughts on its meaning? Sheldon shrugged, but his eyes flickered. Sounds like someone had a grudge. Gerald was cagey, kept things close. Could have been anyone. As Sheldon left, Mrs. Lavinia Gray swept in, her fan fluttering like a trapped butterfly. Oh, Mr. Poirot, what a ghastly affair, she exclaimed, collapsing into the chair with theatrical flair. Poor Gerald. Who could do such a thing? That, madam, is what I shall discover, Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. You were in the drawing room. We did anything unusual catch your eye? Mrs. Gray leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Miss Lyle was gone longer than she claims, closer to 7 minutes, I'd wager. And Mr. Vance, always checking his watch, so fidgety. And Clara, those pearls. She twists them like she's strangling her own secrets. Poirot's mustache twitched with amusement. Your observations are vivid, madam. And Monsieur Gerald's troubles, did you know of them? Mrs. Gray's eyes gleamed. Oh, everyone knew he was in debt. Gambling, horses, cards, a terrible vice. And there was that old scandal in London, something about a woman. All hushed up, but whispers linger. When Mrs. Gray departed, Rupert Vance sauntered in, his tailored suit impeccable, his smile slick as oil. Mr. Poirot, I'm all yours, he said, lounging in the chair with practiced ease. Though what a humble theatre man can offer, I can't imagine. Humble. Poirot's tone was dry. You are a man of influence, Monsieur Vance. Why were you invited to this gathering? Vance's smile tightened. Lady Evelyn's, a patron, wanted my input on a new playhouse. Gerald thought it a waste of funds, argued about it that morning. Got quite heated. And your whereabouts at 425? Poirot pressed, his eyes narrowing. On the terrace, having a cigarette. Vance said smoothly, back by 430. Ask Mrs. Gray, she saw me return. Finally, Miss Beatrice Lyle entered, her plain face composed, her movements measured. Her dowdy dress blended into the room's shadows. But her eyes were sharp, assessing. Mr. Poirot, she said quietly, I know you must suspect everyone, but I had no reason to harm Mr. Harcourt. Poirot studied her, his gaze penetrating. You went to fetch him at 425, oui? How long were you gone, mademoiselle? 3 minutes. No more, she said, her voice steady. His study was empty. I returned at once. And the announcement about the will, did it concern you? Poirot's question was soft, but his eyes missed nothing. Miss Lyle's hands folded tightly in her lap. I am Lady Evelyn's companion, not her heir. Her will is no business of mine. As she left, Poirot closed his notebook and turned to Hastings. Mon ami, what do you observe in our cast of characters? Hastings frowned, his mind racing. Clara's nervous, almost too quick with her alibi. Sheldon's defensive, hiding something about Gerald. Mrs. Gray's a gossip, but she sees everything. Vance is too smooth, and Miss Lyle, she's too controlled, like she's holding something back. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Precisement, Hastings. The alibis, they are like a house of cards, fragile, ready to collapse. The watch, the mud, the letter, these are the keys to the truth. Tomorrow, we shall turn them. As they stepped into the corridor, the clock struck 7 p.m., its chimes echoing like a challenge. Hastings felt the mystery deepening, the suspects' secrets coiling tighter. Poirot's calm certainty was a beacon, guiding them toward the truth hidden within Bungalow Grange's walls. Chapter 5. The red herrings. The morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains of Bungalow Grange, casting a pale glow over the dining room where the household and guests gathered for breakfast. The air was thick with unease, the clink of china, and the murmur of subdued conversation doing little to mask the shadow of Gerald Harcourt's murder. Captain Hastings, seated near the window, observed the strained faces around the table. Lady Evelyn presided with her usual dignity, but her eyes were shadowed, and her hands trembled slightly as she poured tea. Clara Harcourt picked at her toast, her gaze distant, while Dr. Maurice Sheldon ate with mechanical precision. Mrs. Lavinia Gray's usual chatter was muted, and Rupert Vance's slick charm seemed forced. Only Miss Beatrice Lyle appeared composed, her plain features betraying nothing as she buttered a scone. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in a fresh suit, entered the room with a quiet air of authority. Bon matin, Ms. Amos, he said, taking a seat. I trust you have slept, though perhaps not well. Murder. It is a restless companion. Sergeant Brooks, who had joined them, cleared his throat. We've made progress. Mr. Poirot, the coroner, confirms death by a single blow to the temple, delivered between 4:15 and 4:45 p.m. yesterday. The paperweight was wiped clean, no fingerprints. But we've found something else. He produced a small evidence bag containing a gold cufflink, engraved with the initials RV. Found near the library door, Brooks continued, his eyes flicking to Rupert Vance. Care to explain, Mr. Vance? Vance's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. My cufflink. I must have dropped it earlier. I was in the library that morning, discussing the playhouse with Gerald. He was in a foul mood, snapped at me about wasting money. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And yet, Monsieur Vance, you told me you were on the terrace at 4:25, smoking. The library is far from the terrace. Non? How does your cufflink find itself near the scene of the crime? Vance shrugged, his nonchalance strained. It's a big house. Things get lost, found. I'm not the only one with initials RV, you know. Indeed, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. But it is a thread, and we shall pull it. Hastings watched the exchange, noting the way Clara's eyes darted to Vance, then away. Mrs. Gray, unable to resist, leaned forward. Mr. Poirot, surely this points to Mr. Vance. He had a row with Gerald, and now his cufflink. Why? It's practically a confession, Madame Gray, Poirot said sharply. In my experience, the obvious is rarely the truth. The cufflink. It is a clue, but it may also be a distraction. We must look beyond the surface. After breakfast, Poirot and Hastings returned to the library, now cordoned off by Brooks' orders. Poirot paced the room, his small, precise steps echoing on the polished floor. Hastings, he said, consider the mud on the rug. It is dry now, but yesterday it was fresh. The gardener claims he was tending roses. Yet the lawn is pristine. Where does this mud come from? Hastings frowned. Could it be from the flower beds near the house? They're mulched, aren't they? Precisement, Poirot said, his mustache twitching. I have examined the beds this morning. The soil is dark and rich, but our smudge is reddish clay, not the same. This mud, it comes from elsewhere. Poirot moved to the desk, where the half-empty brandy glass still stood. And this glass, why half full? Gerald did not drink it, for there was no alcohol on his breath. Yet it was placed here, carefully, a stage prop, perhaps. You think someone staged the scene? Hastings asked, his mind racing. Poirot nodded. The murderer wishes us to see what they wish us to see. The cufflink, the letter, the glass, these are red herrings, meant to mislead. But Hercule Poirot, he is not so easily fooled. Their conversation was interrupted by Sergeant Brooks, who entered with a new piece of evidence, a small key found in the pocket of Gerald's coat, which hung in the hall. It's not for any door in the house, Brooks said. We've checked. Could be for a safe or a lockbox. Poirot's eyes lit up. A key, you say? This is most significant. Monsieur Gerald, he kept secrets, and secrets require locks. We must find what this key opens. As Brooks left to continue his inquiries, Poirot turned to Hastings. Let us speak to the maid, Ellen. She found the body, and the one who discovers is often the one who knows more than they say. Ellen, a nervous girl of about 20, was found in the pantry, wringing her hands. I didn't see nothing, sir, she said before Poirot could speak. I just went to the library to dust, and there he was, dead. Poirot's gaze was gentle but piercing. Mademoiselle Ellen, you are frightened, and that is natural. But tell me, when you entered, was anything amiss beyond the body? Ellen hesitated, then whispered, "The window, sir. It was shut, but the latch wasn't fully down. I noticed because I always check the windows." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "The latch, not fully down? This is most curious. And did you see anyone near the library before 4:47? Only Miss Lyle, sir, going to the study a bit earlier. And, well, Dr. Sheldon was in the hall, near the library door, around 4:30. He said he was looking for a book." After Ellen was dismissed, Hastings turned to Poirot. "The latch. Poirot, what does it mean? You said the window was locked." "It was," Poirot said, his voice low. "But a latch not fully down suggests someone tampered with it or wished us to think so. Another red herring, perhaps. And Dr. Sheldon in the hall this, too, we must consider." As they stepped into the corridor, the grandfather clock chimed 9 a.m. Hastings felt the weight of the case pressing on him. The cufflink, the mud, the key, the latch, each clue seemed to point in a different direction, yet Poirot's calm certainty was unshaken. "The net is closing, Hastings," he said softly. "The murderer believes they have outwitted us, but they have made a mistake. And that mistake, it will be their undoing." Chapter 6. A clue in detail. Late morning light streamed through the tall windows of Bungalow Grange, casting intricate patterns on the oak-paneled walls of the morning room. Hercule Poirot sat at the small table, his fingers steepled, his eyes half closed as though in meditation. Captain Hastings, standing by the fireplace, felt a restless energy, his mind turning over the clues: the cufflink, the mud, the key, the partially unlatched window. Each seemed a piece of a puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. Poirot, however, appeared serene, his little gray cells working with their usual precision. "Mon ami," Poirot said, breaking the silence, "you are impatient, non? You wish the solution to leap forth like a rabbit from a hat. But the truth, it is like a fine tapestry. It reveals itself only when every thread is examined." Hastings sighed. "I know, Poirot, but it's maddening. The cufflink points to Vance. The mud doesn't match the garden. The key doesn't fit any lock we've found. And now the window latch. Someone's playing games with us." Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Precisement, Hastings. And in those games lies our advantage. The murderer, they are clever, but they cannot resist leaving their mark. Let us consider a detail, a small one, but significant." He rose and led Hastings back to the library, where the scene of Gerald Harcourt's murder remained untouched, save for the removal of the body. Poirot's gaze settled on the desk, where the half-empty brandy glass stood, its amber contents catching the light. "This glass, Hastings," he said. "It troubles me. Why is it half full? Why place it here, when Gerald did not drink it?" Hastings frowned. "You think it was staged, like the cufflink?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, circling the desk. "But there's more. Observe the desk itself. The blotter is slightly askew, and there's a faint mark, a scratch, almost invisible near the edge." Hastings leaned closer, squinting. Sure enough, a thin, curved scratch marred the polished wood, barely noticeable unless one looked for it. "What does it mean, Poirot?" "It means," Poirot said, "that something was moved, something heavy, perhaps a book or a box, dragged across the desk. And yet, nothing appears missing. We must ask, What was here? And why was it moved? Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sergeant Brooks, who carried a small leather-bound notebook. Found this in Gerald's study, he said, handing it to Poirot. It was tucked behind a shelf, almost hidden. Looks like a diary. Poirot opened the notebook, his fingers moving with care. The pages were filled with Gerald's cramped handwriting, detailing appointments, expenses, and cryptic notes. One entry, dated 2 days prior, caught Poirot's eye. Must confront her about the debt. He thinks he can avoid me, but I have proof. 4 p.m. Library. R. Poirot murmured. Rupert Vance. Perhaps. Or another. This is no coincidence. Hastings. Gerald planned a meeting, and that meeting led to his death. Brooks nodded. I've questioned the staff again. The footman, Thomas, says he saw Gerald enter the library at 4 p.m. alone. No one else was seen going in until the maid found him. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet, the mud, the scratch, the glass, these tell a different story. Let us speak to Monsieur Vance again. His cufflink, his initials in the diary. He is a man of interest. They found Rupert Vance in the drawing room, sipping coffee and reading a newspaper with studied nonchalance. His smile was as slick as ever, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as Poirot approached. Monsieur Vance, Poirot began, his voice smooth but unyielding. You told me you were on the terrace at 4:25, smoking. Yet your cufflink was found near the library door. And now we have a diary entry suggesting Gerald wished to confront an R about a debt. What do you say to this? Vance's smile tightened. A debt? Nonsense. Gerald and I argued about the playhouse. Nothing more. As for the cufflink, I told you I was in the library earlier that day. And R could be anyone. Why not ask Dr. Sheldon? His middle name's Richard, isn't it? Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And the scratch on the desk, Monsieur. Did you move something when you were in the library that morning? Vance blinked, caught off guard. Scratch. I don't know anything about a scratch. I was there to talk, not to rearrange furniture. After Vance left, Poirot turned to Hastings. He is clever, this one, but he lies. The scratch, the diary, they point to a confrontation, and the mud suggests someone entered or left in a way we have not yet discovered. Hastings frowned. But the window was locked, Poirot, and the latch. Ellen said it wasn't fully down, but you said it was stiff. Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. The latch is a puzzle within a puzzle. It was tampered with, perhaps to suggest an outside intruder, but the lock was secure. No, Hastings. The answer is inside this house. We must find the lock that fits Gerald's key and the source of that reddish clay. As they stepped into the corridor, the grandfather clock struck 11 a.m. Its chimes a solemn reminder of time slipping away. Poirot's mind was a machine in motion, piecing together the scratch, the mud, the diary, the glass. Hastings felt a familiar thrill. Poirot was closing in, and the murderer's carefully laid plans were beginning to unravel. Chapter 7. More lies surfacey there in Bungalow Grange grew heavier as the day wore on. The weight of Gerald Harcourt's murder pressing down on its inhabitants like a gathering storm. By noon, the house was a hive of whispered conversations and furtive glances, each guest and servant acutely aware of the scrutiny they were under. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the mounting tension, moved through the rooms with his usual meticulous grace, his green eyes missing nothing. Captain Hastings followed, his soldier's instincts alert to the undercurrents of fear and deceit swirling around them. In the morning room, Poirot had spread out Gerald's diary, the cryptic letter, and a rough sketch of the library he had drawn, noting the position of the body, the paperweight, the brandy glass, and the smudge of reddish clay. "Hastings," he said, tapping the sketch, "the details. They are like the notes of a symphony. Each must harmonize, or the truth remains discordant. This scratch on the desk, this mud, they are notes out of tune." Before Hastings could respond, Sergeant Brooks entered, his face grim. "We've found something else, Mr. Poirot." In Gerald's study, behind a panel in the bookcase, a locked box. "The key from his coat fits it." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Magnifique! Show me, Sergeant." They followed Brooks to Gerald's study, a cluttered room filled with books, papers, and a faint smell of tobacco. Behind a row of leather-bound volumes, a small panel had been pried open, revealing a steel lockbox. Brooks inserted the key, and the lid sprang open, revealing a bundle of letters tied with string, a ledger, and a single photograph of a young woman, her face unfamiliar but striking, with dark eyes and a wistful smile. Poirot examined the photograph first, his fingers delicate as he turned it over. On the back was written, "To G, with love, M-1918. He then untied the letters, scanning them quickly. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "These are love letters, written to Gerald years ago. And this ledger, it details payments, large sums, made to an ML over the past decade." Hastings leaned closer. "Blackmail, Poirot? Was Gerald paying someone to keep quiet about an old affair?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice low. "Or perhaps these payments were for another purpose. The initials ML, we must consider who they might belong to. And this photograph, it is a clue to the past. And the past, it often holds the key to the present." Brooks cleared his throat. "There's more. One of the letters mentions a meeting yesterday, at 4 p.m., in the library. It's unsigned, but it's in a woman's hand." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A woman, you say? This complicates matters. We must speak to the ladies of the house again. But first, let us test a theory." They returned to the library, where Poirot knelt by the rug, examining the smudge of reddish clay. "Hastings, fetch the gardener, please. I have a question about the grounds." The gardener, a grizzled man named Jenkins, was summoned. He stood, awkwardly, twisting his cap in his hands. "Mr. Poirot, sir, I was tending the roses all afternoon. Didn't see nothing unusual." Poirot held up a small sample of the clay, preserved in a handkerchief. "This clay, Monsieur Jenkins, it is not from your flower beds. It is reddish, distinct. Is there anywhere on the estate or nearby where such soil might be found?" Jenkins frowned, thinking. "There's a clay pit, sir, about a mile off, near the old quarry. Red stuff, like you say. But no one from the house would have been there yesterday to far, and the ground's been dry." Poirot nodded, dismissing him. A mile is not so far for one determined to create confusion. "This clay, it was brought here deliberately to suggest an outsider. But the locked window tells us otherwise." Back in the morning room, Poirot requested a private word with Miss Beatrice Lyle. She entered, her plain face composed, but her hands betrayed a slight tremor as she smoothed her skirt. "Mademoiselle Lyle," Poirot began, his tone gentle but probing, "you are Lady Evelyn's companion. You see much, yet say little. Tell me, did you know of Monsieur Gerald's financial troubles, or of any personal entanglements?" Miss Lyle's eyes met his, steady but guarded. "Mr. Harcourt kept to himself. I knew he was in debt, everyone did. As for entanglements, I heard rumors of an old scandal, but nothing more. And these initials, M.L., do they mean anything to you? Poirot asked, watching her closely. Her face remained impassive, but her fingers tightened on the arm of the chair. No, Mr. Poirot. They could belong to anyone. After she left, Poirot turned to Hastings. She knows more than she admits. Hastings. Her composure. It is a mask. And the letters, the photograph, they point to a secret Gerald wished to keep hidden. But from whom? As the afternoon wore on, whispers of the lockbox's contents spread through the house. Mrs. Lavinia Gray cornered Hastings in the hall, her voice a stage whisper. They're saying Gerald was blackmailed. Oh, Captain, do you think it was one of us? That Miss Lyle, she's so quiet. It's unnatural. Hastings, uncomfortable with her gossip, extricated himself and rejoined Poirot, who was studying the ledger. Look here, Hastings, Poirot said, pointing to an entry. Payments to M.L. stopped 3 months ago, then resumed last week larger sums. Gerald was desperate, perhaps, to silence someone, and that someone, they were in this house. Yesterday, the clock struck 2 p.m., its chimes a reminder of the fleeting hours. Hastings felt the net tightening, the lies of Bungalow Grange beginning to surface like cracks in a frozen pond. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet determination. The truth. It is close. Mon ami. One more push, and the house of cards will fall. Chapter 8. The emotional turning point. Afternoon sun hung low over Bungalow Grange, casting a golden glow that did little to dispel the chill of suspicion permeating the estate. The house, once a haven of polite civility, now felt like a stage, where every glance and word was laden with hidden meaning. Hercule Poirot, ever the orchestrator of truth, sat in the morning room, his notebook filled with precise annotations. Captain Hastings stood by the window, watching the shadows lengthen across the lawn, his mind wrestling with the tangle of clues, the reddish clay, the scratched desk, the mysterious M.L., and the locked box's revelations. Poirot's voice broke the silence, calm but insistent. Hastings, mon ami, we are at a crossroads. The murderer. They have woven a clever web, but it is fraying. Today, we shall apply a little pressure, and someone, I think, will break. Their opportunity came sooner than expected. As they stepped into the drawing room, they found Clara Harcourt alone, seated on a velvet settee, her face pale and her hands clasped tightly. She looked up, startled, as Poirot approached, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Mademoiselle, Clara, Poirot said gently, sitting opposite her. You are troubled, non? The weight of this tragedy. It is heavy on your heart. Tell me, what do you know of your uncle's secrets? Clara's lips trembled, and for a moment, it seemed she would remain silent. Then, with a choked sob, she spoke. Uncle Gerald. He was not himself these past weeks. He was frightened, Mr. Poirot. He told me only 2 days ago that someone was threatening him. He wouldn't say who, but he said it was about a woman from his past. Poirot's eyes narrowed, though his tone remained soft. A woman, you say? Did he mention a name? Or initials, perhaps M.L.? Clara shook her head, tears spilling over. No, he wouldn't tell me. But he said it could ruin everything, his reputation, Aunt Evelyn's plans, even my inheritance. He was so angry, so desperate. Hastings, watching closely, felt a pang of sympathy. Clara's distress seemed genuine, but was it grief or guilt? He glanced at Poirot. who was studying her with an intensity that belied his gentle demeanor. "Merci, mademoiselle," Poirot said, rising. "Your candor is most illuminating. Do not fear the truth. It will protect the innocent." As Clara left, wiping her eyes, Poirot turned to Hastings. "Her tears, they are real, but they hide something. She knows more than she says, perhaps more than she realizes. We must now speak to another who guards their secrets closely." They found Miss Beatrice Lyle in the conservatory, arranging flowers with mechanical precision. Her plain face was composed, but her hands betrayed a slight tremor as Poirot approached. "Mademoiselle Lyle," he began, his voice smooth but probing, "you have been most discreet, but I sense you see much in this house. The letters we found, addressed to M.L., do they stir any memory?" Miss Lyle's hands stilled, and for a moment her eyes met Poirot's, sharp and wary. "I told you, Mr. Poirot, I know nothing of Mr. Harcourt's private affairs. My duties are to Lady Evelyn." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching. "And yet, mademoiselle, your initials they are B.L., non? Not so far from M.L., and you were near the library at 4:25, seeking Monsieur Gerald. Tell me, what did you see in his study?" Her composure cracked, her voice rising slightly. "I saw nothing. The study was empty. I returned to the drawing room at once. You cannot think I had anything to do with this." Poirot raised a hand, calming her. "I accuse no one, mademoiselle. But the truth, it is like a flower, it must be coaxed into bloom. If you know anything of this M.L., or of Gerald's fears, now is the time to speak." Miss Lyle's lips parted, and for a moment it seemed she might confess something, but then her face hardened, and she turned away. "I have nothing to say, Mr. Poirot." As she left, Hastings whispered, "She's hiding something, Poirot. Did you see her hands? She's nervous." "We?" "Hastings," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "She is a locked box, like the one we found. But we have the key, the pressure of truth. Let us now speak to Lady Evelyn." They found Lady Evelyn in her private sitting room, her regal bearing strained by the events of the past day. She rose as they entered, her blue eyes sharp despite the lines of fatigue around them. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "I trust you are making progress. This house cannot bear much more suspicion." "Madam," Poirot said, bowing slightly, "we are close to the truth, but I require your assistance. The letters, the payments to M.L., they suggest a secret your brother kept, one tied to a woman from his past. Do you know of this?" Lady Evelyn's face paled, and she sank into her chair. "A woman," she murmured. "Yes, there was someone, years ago. A scandal. Hushed up. Gerald was involved with a woman named Margaret Lyle, no relation to Beatrice. I assure you, she disappeared after Gerald ended the affair. I thought it was over." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Margaret Lyle, M.L., and the payments in the ledger were they to her?" "I don't know," Lady Evelyn admitted, her voice breaking. "Gerald never spoke of it, but he was agitated lately, saying he'd made a terrible mistake. I thought it was about the will, but perhaps—" Her voice trailed off, and Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "Merci, madam. Your honesty brings us closer to the truth." As they left the sitting room, the grandfather clock struck for p.m., its chimes echoing through the silent house. Hastings felt a surge of excitement. Poirot was peeling back the layers of deceit, and the truth was beginning to emerge. "Margaret Lyle," he said. "Could she be the key, Poirot?" "Perhaps, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice soft. but certain. But the heart of this mystery lies not only in the past, but in the present among those who walk these halls. Someone has broken under the weight of their secret, and soon they will break again. Chapter 9. The Trap. The evening shadows deepened over Bungalow Grange, cloaking the estate in a somber hush as the clock in the hall struck 7 p.m. The guests and household, weary from a day of questioning and suspicion, were summoned to the drawing-room by Hercule Poirot. His request was delivered with polite insistence, but Captain Hastings sensed the purpose behind it. Poirot was setting a trap, his little grey cells poised to expose the cracks in the murderer's carefully constructed facade. The drawing-room was a study in tension. Lady Evelyn sat erect in a high-backed chair, her blue eyes wary but composed. Clara Harcourt, pale and fragile, clutched a handkerchief, her gaze flickering nervously. Dr. Maurice Sheldon leaned against the mantel, his fingers tapping an impatient rhythm. Mrs. Lavinia Gray, her fan idol for once, sat with a look of eager anticipation, while Rupert Vance lounged in a corner, his slick smile masking a taut alertness. Miss Beatrice Lyle, ever unobtrusive, stood near Lady Evelyn, her plain face unreadable but her hands clasped tightly. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small figure commanding the room with quiet authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured. "We are gathered to confront a crime most heinous, the murder of Gerald Harcourt. Each of you has a part in this drama, whether as witness, suspect, or something more. Tonight, I shall lay bare the threads of this mystery, and we shall see who unravels." A murmur rippled through the room. Hastings, standing near the door, watched the faces closely, noting the subtle shifts: Clara's trembling lip, Sheldon's tightened jaw, Vance's forced ease. Poirot continued, his eyes sweeping the group. "Let us begin with the scene. A library, locked from within. A man struck down by a brass paperweight. A half-empty glass of brandy, untouched by the victim. A smudge of reddish clay, far into these grounds. A cufflink, a letter, a key to a hidden box. These are the pieces of our puzzle. But they are not random. They are deliberate, placed to mislead." Mrs. Gray gasped, her fan twitching. "You mean someone planted evidence?" "Precisement, madam," Poirot said, his gaze steady. "The cufflink, engraved with RV, points to Monsieur Vance. But it is too convenient. A man as careful as Monsieur Vance does not leave such a clue by accident. And the letter, the truth will out. It is typed, anonymous, meant to suggest a threat. But it is the mud that intrigues me most. Reddish clay, from a quarry a mile away. Yet the window was locked, the latch stiff. No outsider entered this house." Dr. Sheldon shifted, his voice sharp. "Then it's one of us, isn't it? You're saying the murderer is in this room?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "I say only what the evidence tells me, doctor. Let us consider the lockbox, found in Gerald's study. Letters to a woman, Margaret Lyle, from years past. Payments to M.L. in a ledger, stopped, then resumed. A photograph, a reminder of a scandal. Gerald was afraid, was he not? He planned to confront someone. In the library at 4 p.m. yesterday." All eyes turned to Rupert Vance, who raised his hands defensively. "I told you, Poirot. I was on the terrace at 4:25. Gerald and I argued about the playhouse, not debts. You've got the wrong R." Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Sheldon. "And you, doctor, whose middle name is Richard. You were seen near the library at 4:30, looking for a book. You said, a curious time to browse. Sheldon's face reddened. I'm a doctor, not a murderer. I was checking on a medical text Gerald had borrowed. Asked the maid. Poirot turned to Miss Lyle, his voice softening. And you, Mademoiselle Lyle, who went to fetch Gerald at 4:25. You say his study was empty. Yet Ellen saw you lingering near the library. And your initials BL are not so far from ML. Could it be a coincidence? Miss Lyle's composure faltered, her hands tightening. I am not Margaret Lyle, Mr. Poirot. I have no connection to those letters. Lady Evelyn spoke up, her voice strained. Enough, Mr. Poirot. You're upsetting everyone. What are you driving at? Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. I am driving at the truth. Madam, let us consider the brandy glass half full. Yet Gerald did not drink it. Why? Because it was placed there after his death, to suggest a moment of calm before the murder. And the scratch on the desk, a heavy object, was moved, perhaps to hide something. But what? He paced slowly, his eyes never leaving the group. Hastings felt the tension rise. Like a bowstring drawn taut, Poirot was closing in, and someone was about to snap. And now, Poirot said, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper, let us speak of motive. Gerald's debts, his scandal, his fear, they point to a secret someone wished to keep buried. Someone in this room knew that secret and killed to protect it. I ask you now, who among you was in the library between 4:15 and 4:45? Silence fell, heavy and oppressive. Then, to everyone's shock, Clara Harcourt stood, her face ashen. I can't bear it any longer, she cried, her voice breaking. I was there, Mr. Poirot. I went to the library at 4:20 to talk to Uncle Gerald about the will. He was alive when I left, I swear. But I saw someone else in the corridor as I left, Miss Lyle, coming from the study. All eyes turned to Beatrice Lyle, whose face drained of color. That's a lie, she snapped, her calm shattering. I was in the study, not the library. Clara, why would you say such a thing? Poirot's eyes gleamed with triumph. Merci, Mademoiselle Clara. You have given us a truth, and with it, a crack in the murderer's armor. The trap, it is sprung. As the room erupted in gasps and accusations, Hastings caught Poirot's glance. The detective's expression was one of quiet satisfaction. The net was tightening, and the truth was closer than ever. Chapter 10. The revealed drawing room of Bungalow Grange was charged with a palpable tension, the air thick with anticipation as Hercule Poirot stood before the assembled company. The flickering firelight cast long shadows across the faces of Lady Evelyn, Clara Harcourt, Dr. Maurice Sheldon, Mrs. Lavinia Gray, Rupert Vance, and Miss Beatrice Lyle, each betraying a mix of dread and curiosity. Captain Hastings, positioned near the door, felt his pulse quicken. Poirot's trap had been sprung, and now, with the precision of a master conductor, he was about to bring the symphony of clues to its crescendo. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding. We have reached the moment of truth. The murder of Gerald Harcourt was no act of impulse, but a calculated crime, woven with threads of deceit, red herrings, half-truths, and carefully placed clues. Tonight, Hercule Poirot will unravel this web and name the murderer. A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. Clara clutched her handkerchief, her eyes wide. Dr. Sheldon's fingers stilled on the mantel, and Rupert Vance's smile vanished. Miss Lyle's face remained a mask, but her hands betrayed a faint tremble. Let us reconstruct, Poirot continued, pacing slowly. Gerald Harcourt was struck down in the library between 4:15 and 4:45 p.m. The weapon, a brass paperweight, was wiped clean. A half-empty brandy glass, untouched by Gerald, suggested a staged scene. A smudge of reddish clay, from a quarry a mile away, hinted at an outsider. Yet the window was locked. A cufflink, a cryptic letter, a key to a lockbox. These were meant to mislead. But the truth, it cannot be hidden from the little gray cells. Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the room. The lockbox revealed letters and payments to M.L. Margaret Lyle, a woman from Gerald's past. A scandal, hushed up, but never forgotten. Gerald was paying to keep it secret. But the payments resumed last week, larger than before. Why? Because someone was blackmailing him, threatening to expose the truth before Lady Evelyn's announcement about her will. Mrs. Gray gasped. Blackmail? Then it must be someone who knew about Margaret. Poirot nodded. Precisement, madam. But let us consider the alibis. All were in the drawing room, except Mademoiselle Clara, who admits to visiting the library at 4:20, and Mademoiselle Lyle, who was in the study at 4:25. The footman saw Gerald alive at 4:15, and the maid found him dead at 4:47. A narrow window. None. Yet one clue: the scratch on the desk tells us something was moved, perhaps to hide evidence. He turned to Rupert Vance. Monsieur Vance, your cufflink was found near the library door. You claim it was dropped earlier, but your initials, RV, match the R in Gerald's diary. Who he planned to confront at 4 p.m. You argued about money. But was it the playhouse or something deeper? Vance's face hardened. I told you, it was the playhouse. I was on the terrace at 4:25. Ask anyone. Poirot's eyes shifted to Dr. Sheldon. And you, doctor, were seen near the library at 4:30, seeking a book. Your middle name is Richard, another R. Did Gerald confront you about a debt? Perhaps one tied to your refusal to lend him money? Sheldon's jaw clenched. I had no reason to kill him. I was looking for a medical text. As I said. Poirot turned to Miss Lyle, his voice softening. Mademoiselle Lyle, you were near the library, and Clara claims to have seen you in the corridor. Your initials, BL, are close to ML. Were you connected to Margaret Lyle? Or did you know of Gerald's secret? Miss Lyle's composure cracked, her voice sharp. I am not Margaret Lyle. I knew nothing of his affairs. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Patience, Miss Amos. The truth lies not in one clue, but in their harmony. The reddish clay, it was brought from the quarry to suggest an outsider. But the locked window betrays this lie. The brandy glass, placed after death, points to a careful mind. The scratch on the desk, it was caused by moving a heavy object. A book, perhaps, to conceal a letter or document. And the key, it unlocked the truth of Gerald's past. He paused, his eyes locking onto Lady Evelyn. Madam, you spoke of Margaret Lyle, a scandal hushed up. But there's more. Gerald was not just paying to silence her, he was protecting someone else, someone in this house. The murderer killed to prevent that secret from coming to light. Before the will was changed, Lady Evelyn's face paled, but she remained silent. Poirot turned to Clara. Mademoiselle Clara, you admitted to being in the library at 4:20. You saw Gerald alive, but you lied about one thing. You did not leave immediately. You stayed, and you heard something, a conversation. Perhaps that frightened you. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I heard Uncle Gerald arguing with someone. I couldn't see who, but it was a woman's voice. I left quickly. I swear. Poirot nodded, then turned to Miss Lyle. And you, Mademoiselle Lyle, you were not in the study as you claimed. You were in the library, confronting Gerald about the payments to Margaret Lyle, your sister. The room gasped. Miss Lyle's face drained of color, and she staggered back. No, that's not true. Mais oui, Poirot said, his voice relentless. You are Beatrice Lyle, but Margaret was your sister. Gerald's payments were to her, to keep her silence about their affair and about the child she bore, a secret. That would ruin your position in this house. When Gerald threatened to stop the payments, you acted. You struck him with the paperweight, wiped it clean, and planted the clay to suggest an intruder. The brandy glass, the cufflink, these were your distractions. But the scratch on the desk, caused by moving a book to hide a letter you wrote, betrayed you. Miss Lyle's composure shattered, and she sank into a chair, sobbing. I didn't mean to kill him. He was going to tell everyone, ruin me, ruin Margaret's memory. I only wanted to stop him. Poirot's expression softened, but his voice was firm. You chose murder, mademoiselle, and in doing so, you lost everything. As Sergeant Brooks moved to restrain her, the room fell silent, the weight of the truth settling over Bungalow Grange. Hastings stared at Poirot, awestruck by the precision of his logic. The little gray cells had triumphed again. Chapter 11. The reflection thay drawing room of Bungalow Grange, so recently a stage for revelation, now lay quiet, the fire reduced to glowing embers. The guests had dispersed, their faces etched with shock and relief, while Sergeant Brooks escorted Miss Beatrice Lyle to the waiting police car. The night outside was still, the stars obscured by a veil of clouds, as if the heavens themselves mourned the tragedy that had unfolded. Captain Hastings stood by the window, his mind replaying the dramatic unmasking of the murderer, while Hercule Poirot sat in a high-backed chair, his hands folded neatly, his expression one of quiet contemplation. Mon ami, Poirot said at last, his voice soft but clear. You are troubled, non? The resolution of a crime. It brings no joy, only understanding. Yet you seem unsettled. Hastings turned, his brow furrowed. It's just Miss Lyle, Poirot. She seemed so unassuming, so invisible. How did you know it was her? And how did you piece it all together? The clay, the scratch, the letters. Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. The little gray cells, Hastings, they do not rest. Let me explain. For clarity is the reward of truth. From the beginning, the scene was to perfect the brandy glass, untouched, the cufflink, too conveniently placed, the reddish clay, far into the estate. These were not accidents but artifice, designed to mislead. The murderer wished us to chase shadows, an outsider, a debt, a quarrel with Monsieur Vance or Dr. Sheldon. But the truth, it lies in the contradictions. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. The scratch on the deskette was no accident. A heavy object, a book perhaps, was moved to conceal something, a letter, written by Miss Lyle to Gerald, demanding he continue the payments to her sister, Margaret. The clay, brought from the quarry, was meant to suggest an intruder, but the locked window betrayed this lie. The latch, not fully down, was a clever touch, but it was stiff, unmoved. 4 years, no one entered or left that way. Hastings nodded slowly. And the letters in the lockbox, those payments to M.L. We, Poirot said. Margaret Lyle, the sister of Beatrice. Gerald's affair with her produced a child, a secret that could ruin Beatrice's position as Lady Evelyn's trusted companion. When Gerald threatened to stop the payments, fearing exposure before the will was changed, Beatrice acted. She confronted him in the library at 4:20, after Clara's visit. In a moment of panic, she struck him with the paperweight, then staged the scene, wiping the weapon, placing the glass, scattering the clay. The cufflink she took from Vance's coat in the hall to cast suspicion elsewhere. "But how did you know she was Margaret's sister?" Hastings asked, still marveling. Poirot's smile was wry. "A small detail, Hastings, the way she reacted when I mentioned ML." Her composure faltered. "Only for a moment. But it was enough. And her insistence on knowing nothing of Gerald's affairs, it was too perfect, too practiced. The innocent, they are not so careful." Then Clara's outburst in the drawing room. She saw Beatrice near the library, not the study. That was the crack in Beatrice's armor, and the truth spilled out. Hastings shook his head. "It's brilliant, Poirot, but it's so sad. Beatrice killed to protect her sister's secret. And now she's lost everything." Poirot's expression grew somber. "Oui, mon ami. Crime. It is a tragedy, not only for the victim but for the one who commits it. Beatrice Lyle chose to kill rather than face exposure, and in doing so, she betrayed herself. It is the way of human nature. Fear and pride, they lead to destruction." He rose, adjusting his cuffs with meticulous care. "Come, Hastings. Our work here is done. The truth is revealed, and justice will follow. Let us leave Bungalow Grange to its healing." As they stepped into the hall, the grandfather clock struck 9 p.m., its chimes a solemn farewell. Lady Evelyn appeared at the top of the staircase, her face weary but resolute. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "I cannot thank you enough. You have brought clarity to this darkness." Poirot bowed slightly. "Madam, it is my duty to seek the truth, no matter how painful. I wish you peace." Outside, the night air was cool, the village of St. Mary Mead silent under its blanket of stars. As they walked to the car that would take them to the station, Hastings glanced at Poirot. "You always see what others miss, old chap. It's uncanny." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Not uncanny, Hastings, merely methodical. The little grey cells, they observe, they deduce, they triumph. And now, mon ami, I long for a tisane and a quiet evening. Crime, it is exhausting. Non." Hastings chuckled, the weight of the case lifting slightly. As the car pulled away, Bungalow Grange receded into the darkness, its secrets laid bare by the unyielding logic of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 12. The Aftermath. Morning. Following the dramatic revelation in the drawing room of Bungalow Grange was subdued, as if the house itself were recovering from the shock of truth laid bare. The pale sunlight filtering through the tall windows did little to warm the atmosphere, which remained heavy with the echoes of Beatrice Lyle's confession. Captain Hastings, seated at the breakfast table, sipped his coffee, his thoughts still tangled in the intricacies of the case. Across from him, Hercule Poirot, immaculate as ever, buttered a slice of toast with precise movements, his green eyes distant but alert. "Mon ami," Poirot said, breaking the silence, "you are quiet this morning. The resolution of a crime. It should bring satisfaction, yet you seem pensive." Hastings set down his cup, his brow furrowed. "It's just, Poirot, the whole affair feels so tragic. Beatrice Lyle, such a quiet, unassuming woman, driven to murder over a secret from years ago. And poor Lady Evelyn, losing her brother and her companion in one fell swoop. It's a grim business." Poirot nodded, his expression softening. "Oui, Hastings, it is grim, but it is the nature of crime to leave scars. The truth, it heals, but it also wounds. Beatrice Lyle chose to protect her sister's memory, and in doing so, she destroyed herself. Such is the paradox of human folly. The door opened, and Lady Evelyn entered, her regal bearing intact despite the faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes. She inclined her head to Poirot and Hastings, taking a seat at the head of the table. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice steady but low, "I owe you a debt of gratitude. This house was on the brink of ruin, and you have restored order, however painful the cost." Poirot bowed slightly from his seat. "Madam, it is my duty to uncover the truth, no matter how deeply it is buried. I regret the pain it has caused you." Lady Evelyn's lips tightened. "Beatrice, I never suspected her. She was so loyal, so discreet. To think she carried such a burden, her sister's scandal. The child, I should have seen her distress. Do not blame yourself, madam," Poirot said gently. "The heart, it is a labyrinth, and even the closest among us can hide their true paths." Beatrice acted out of love and fear, a dangerous combination. Hastings, stirred by curiosity, ventured, "Poirot, there's one thing I still don't understand. The reddish clay, how did Beatrice get it? And why go to such lengths to plant it?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "An excellent question, Hastings. The clay, it was her masterstroke, yet her undoing. I learned this morning from the gardener, Jenkins, that a delivery of quarry clay was brought to the village 2 days ago, for a potter's workshop. Beatrice, in her quiet way, had access to the village. She was often sent on errands for Lady Evelyn. She took a small amount, perhaps in a handkerchief, and scattered it in the library to suggest an intruder. But she did not account for the locked window, nor the distinct nature of the clay, which no one in the household would naturally encounter." Lady Evelyn's eyes widened. "So deliberate, and yet so desperate." "Precisement," Poirot said. "Her plan was meticulous, but no plan is perfect. The scratch on the desk, caused by moving a heavy book to hide her letter to Gerald, was her mistake. The letter, demanding he continue payments to Margaret, was her motive laid bare. When Clara placed her in the corridor near the library, her facade crumbled. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sergeant Brooks, who looked weary, but satisfied. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, nodding. "Miss Lyle's made a full confession at the station. She admitted everything, taking the clay, planting the cufflink, staging the brandy glass. She's broken, poor woman. Says she only meant to scare Gerald, but when he laughed at her demands, she lost control." Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "It is always so, Sergeant. The moment of passion, it betrays even the most careful mind." Brooks hesitated, then added, "There's one more thing. The child, Margaret Lyle's daughter, is alive, living in London under a different name. Beatrice was sending her money, too, from her own savings. She wanted to protect her niece, no matter the cost." Lady Evelyn's hand went to her throat. "A child? Gerald's child? I had no idea." Poirot's gaze softened. "Madam, you may yet find a way to make amends. The truth, it opens doors as well as closes them." As Brooks departed, the breakfast room fell silent. Hastings felt a pang of sorrow for the tangled lives caught in this tragedy. Gerald, Beatrice, the unknown child. Yet Poirot's words lingered. The truth opened doors. Perhaps, in time, healing would follow. Poirot rose, adjusting his cuffs. "Come, Hastings. Our train awaits. We have done what we came to do, and St. Mary Mead must find its peace without us." As they left the dining room, The grandfather clock struck 9:30 a.m. Its chimes a gentle reminder of time moving forward. Bungalow Grange, scarred but standing, would endure. And Hastings knew that Poirot's brilliance had once again brought light to its darkest corners. Chapter 13. The Hidden Truths. The morning air in St. Mary Mead was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings prepared to depart Bungalow Grange. The house, though still grand in its Georgian elegance, seemed diminished, its walls heavy with the weight of recent revelations. The guests, now free to leave, lingered in a state of uneasy quiet, their conversations subdued as they grappled with the aftermath of Beatrice Lyle's confession. Hastings, his suitcase packed, stood in the hall, watching Poirot adjust his hat in the mirror with characteristic precision. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Hastings. "You are ready, but I sense you are not yet at peace with this case. There is something that troubles you still." Hastings nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's the child, Poirot. Margaret Lyle's daughter. Beatrice was protecting her. But what happens to her now? And how did Beatrice manage to keep such a secret from everyone, even Lady Evelyn?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. "An excellent question, Hastings. The human heart. It is a vault of secrets, and Beatrice Lyle was a master of concealment. But let us linger a moment longer. There is one final thread to examine before we leave this place." They were interrupted by the arrival of Clara Harcourt, who approached hesitantly, her delicate features drawn with worry. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice soft, I wanted to thank you, and to ask something. Aunt Evelyn told me about the child, Uncle Gerald's daughter. I want to find her, to help her. It's what Uncle would have wanted, I think." Poirot regarded her with gentle approval. "Mademoiselle Clara, your compassion does you credit. The child, she is a link to your uncle's past, and perhaps to your family's future. I shall provide Sergeant Brooks with the information we have, and he will assist you in locating her." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she managed a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Poirot. You've given us a chance to make things right." As Clara left, Poirot led Hastings to the library, now cleared of police tape but still haunted by the memory of Gerald's death. Poirot stood by the desk, his fingers tracing the faint scratch that had been a pivotal clue. "Hastings," he said, "this case, it was not only about murder, but about the burdens of secrecy. Beatrice Lyle killed to protect her niece, but her silence caused more pain than the truth ever could." Hastings frowned. "But how did you know it was Beatrice? Beyond the clues, there was Vance's cufflink, Sheldon's presence in the hall. Any of them could have been guilty." Poirot's mustache twitched. "The clues, they pointed in many directions. But the psychology, it pointed to Beatrice. She was invisible, the companion who saw all, said little, and was overlooked. Yet her loyalty to her sister, her fear of exposure, drove her to desperation. The letter she hid, the clay she planted, these were the acts of a woman who believed she could control the narrative. But the scratch on the desk, caused by her haste to conceal her letter, was her fatal error." Hastings shook his head, marveling. "You saw it all, Poirot. The rest of us were chasing shadows." "Not shadows, mon ami, but reflections," Poirot corrected. "Each suspect reflected a piece of the truth: Vance's debts, Sheldon's resentment, Clara's fear, Lady Evelyn's guilt. But only Beatrice's reflection was complete, for she carried the weight of her sister's scandal and her niece's future." Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of Dr. Maurice Sheldon, who looked weary but resolute. "Mr. Poirot," he said, I owe you an apology. I was less than forthcoming about my dealings with Gerald. He did ask me for a loan, and I refused. But it wasn't just about money. He hinted at knowing something about my past, a mistake I made as a young doctor. I thought he was trying to blackmail me. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this mistake, doctorate, was significant. Sheldon sighed. A misdiagnosis, years ago, that cost a patient their health. I've carried the guilt ever since. Gerald knew, but he never used it against me. I see now he was just desperate. Poirot nodded. The past, it casts long shadows. Thank you for your honesty, Doctor. It confirms what I suspected. Gerald's knowledge made him a threat to many, but only one acted. As Sheldon left, the grandfather clock struck 10 a.m., its chimes a gentle reminder of their impending departure. Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression serene. Come, mon ami. The train to London awaits, and I have a longing for my apartment, my Tizon, and the order of a quiet life. They stepped into the hall, where Lady Evelyn waited to bid them farewell. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, she said, her voice warm despite her fatigue. You have my eternal gratitude. Bungalow Grange will heal, in time, thanks to you. Poirot bowed. Madam, it is the truth that heals. Guard it well. As they walked to the car, the village of St. Mary Mead stretched out before them, peaceful once more. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose calm certainty was as unshakable as ever. The case was closed, but its lessons about secrets, loyalty, and the cost of silence would linger long after they left Bungalow Grange behind. Chapter 14. The final thread's train to London clattered along the tracks, its rhythmic sway a soothing counterpoint to the turmoil left behind at Bungalow Grange. Hercule Poirot sat by the window, his small, neat figure framed against the passing countryside, his green eyes fixed on some distant point. Captain Hastings, seated opposite, leafed through a newspaper, but his thoughts were still with the events in St. Mary Mead. The case was solved, the murderer unmasked, yet a sense of unfinished business nagged at him, like a melody unresolved. Poirot, Hastings ventured, folding the newspaper. You've tied up the case neatly, as always. But there's something that bothers me. Beatrice Lyle, she acted alone, didn't she? Or could there have been someone else involved? Someone we overlooked? Poirot turned from the window, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. Mon ami, you are like a dog with a bone, always seeking one more clue. Beatrice Lyle acted alone in the act of murder, but the web of secrets at Bungalow Grange was spun by many hands. Each suspect contributed a thread: Gerald's debts, Lady Evelyn's will, Sheldon's past, Clara's fear. It was their silence, their hidden truths, that gave Beatrice the opportunity to strike. Hastings frowned. But the child, Margaret Lyle's daughter, what will become of her? Clara seemed determined to find her, but it's such a tangled mess. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. The child, she is the final thread. Clara's resolve is commendable. I have spoken to Sergeant Brooks, and he will trace the girl through the records in London. Lady Evelyn, too, has promised to make amends, perhaps by including the child in her revised will. The truth, it has opened a door to redemption, even amidst tragedy. Hastings leaned back, thoughtful, and Rupert Vance. His cufflink was a distraction, but he was so slippery. Could he have known more than he let on? Vance, Poirot said, his tone dry, is a man who thrives on ambiguity. His debts to Gerald were real, but his role in the murder was merely that of a convenient scapegoat. Beatrice chose his cufflink because it was accessible, left carelessly in his coat. He is guilty of greed, perhaps, but not of murder. The train whistle blew, signaling their approach to a station. Poirot adjusted his gloves, his movements precise. This case, Hastings, it reminds us of the fragility of trust. Beatrice Lyle was trusted by Lady Evelyn, yet she betrayed that trust to protect another. Gerald trusted his secrets would remain buried, yet they surfaced to destroy him. It is a lesson, that truth, though painful, is the only foundation for order. Hastings nodded, his mind drifting to the quiet moments in the library, the scratch on the desk, the reddish clay, the brandy glass. You saw it all so clearly, Poirot. The rest of us were stumbling in the dark. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Not stumbling, mon ami, merely seeing with different eyes. You observed the facts, but the little gray cells, they arranged those facts into a pattern. The scratch, it told of haste. The clay, of deception. The glass, of staging. Each clue was a note, and together they sang the song of Beatrice's guilt. The train slowed, and the platform of a small station came into view. Hastings glanced out, noting the time on his watch. 11:45 a.m. We'll be in London soon, he said. Back to civilization. A civilization, Poirot mused, is but a veneer. Hastings, beneath it, the human heart remains the same, capable of great love and great folly. This case, it has shown us both. As the train pulled away from the station, Poirot leaned back, closing his eyes. Now, mon ami, I shall rest. A tisan awaits me in London, and perhaps a quiet evening with no murders to disturb it. Hastings chuckled, the tension of the past days easing. Bungalow Grange was behind them, its secrets laid bare. The truth had been found, justice served, and the future, for those left behind, held the promise of healing. Yet as the countryside rolled by, Hastings knew that wherever Poirot went, another mystery would surely follow, waiting to be unraveled by the little grey cells. Chapter 15. The departure of the London train rolled into Victoria Station under a grey afternoon sky. The hustle of the platform a sharp contrast to the quiet melancholy of St. Mary Mead. Hercule Poirot, his small suitcase in hand, stepped onto the platform with his usual fastidious grace, his moustache impeccably waxed despite the journey. Captain Hastings followed, carrying his own bag, his mind still lingering on the events at Bungalow Grange. The case was closed, the murderer confessed, yet the weight of its revelations clung to him like damp wool. As they navigated the crowded station, Poirot glanced at Hastings, his green eyes perceptive. Mon ami, you are still with the ghosts of Bungalow Grange, non? The case is solved, the truth revealed. Why do you linger in its shadows? Hastings sighed, adjusting his hat. It's not the case itself, Poirot. It's the people, Clara, Lady Evelyn, even Beatrice. They're all left to pick up the pieces. And that child, Margaret Lyle's daughter. I wonder if she'll ever know the truth about her father. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. The truth. It is a double-edged sword, Hastings. It wounds, but it also frees. Mademoiselle Clara and Lady Evelyn, they have the chance to rebuild, to extend a hand to the child. As for Beatrice Lyle, her confession was her liberation, though it comes at a heavy price. Justice, it is not always kind, but it is necessary. They emerged onto the bustling streets of London, the air thick with the scent of coal smoke and the clamor of taxis. Poirot hailed a cab, giving his address with crisp precision. As they settled into the back seat, Hastings ventured, You know, Poirot, I keep thinking about how you saw through Beatrice's facade. The way you pieced together the scratch, the clay, the glass. It's like you were reading a book no one else could see. Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. A book, but one written in the language of human nature. The scratch on the deskit spoke of haste, of a letter hidden in panic. The reddish clay, so carefully placed, betrayed a mind desperate to mislead. The brandy glass, untouched by Gerald, was a stage prop, nothing more. These were not clues in isolation, Hastings, but sentences in a story. And Beatrice, she wrote her guilt in every line. Hastings leaned back, marveling, and the cufflink planting it to frame Vance. She nearly had us fooled. Non, mon ami, Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm. She fooled herself. The murderer always believes their plan is perfect, but the little gray cells, they see the flaws. Beatrice's mistake was underestimating the power of observation. She thought her invisibility as a companion would protect her, but it was her very discretion that made her visible to me. The cab pulled up to Poirot's flat, a neat, unassuming building that suited his orderly nature. As they stepped out, the clock on a nearby church struck 2 p.m., its chimes mingling with the city's hum. Poirot paid the driver, then turned to Hastings. You will join me for a tisane, After such a case, we deserve a moment of repose. Inside, Poirot's flat was a haven of order-polished furniture, meticulously arranged books, and a faint scent of lavender. As Poirot prepared the tisane, Hastings settled into an armchair, his thoughts drifting to St. Mary Mead. Do you think Lady Evelyn will change her will, Poirot? To include Gerald's daughter, Poirot poured the steaming liquid into delicate cups, his movements precise. I believe she will, Hastings. Lady Evelyn is a woman of honor, and the truth has given her a new purpose. The child, she represents a chance to heal old wounds. And Clara, with her kind heart, will ensure it. Handing Hastings a cup, Poirot sat opposite him, his expression serene. This case, it reminds us, mon ami, that secrets are like shadows. They grow in darkness but vanish in light. Gerald's secret destroyed him, and Beatrice's destroyed her. Yet the truth, it has set others free. Hastings sipped the tisane, its warmth soothing. You always find the light, Poirot, no matter how dark the mystery. Poirot's eyes twinkled. It is not I, Hastings, but the method, order, logic, observation. These are the tools of truth, and with them, no mystery can remain unsolved. As the afternoon light faded, casting soft shadows across the room, Hastings felt a sense of closure. Bungalow Grange was behind them, its secrets laid bare, its future in the hands of those who remained. Poirot, ever the guardian of truth, would move on to the next puzzle, his little gray cells ready for whatever lay ahead. And Hastings, as always, would be by his side, marveling at the brilliance of the little Belgian detective.